Hey guys, welcome back to the Squawk Works Garage YouTube channel. Today we're going to make a video that we honestly should have made a long time ago, and that's going to be a brief history, overview, and update on the Ferrari-powered Porsche. I'm going to talk about everything that basically led up to it being what it is today, where it is right now, and then where we hope to go moving forward. But real quick, before we get too far into this, we have merch available at squonkworks.com. See, it's got the nice little Squonkworks right here, and then this one's one of my favorite, hammer, because let's be honest, we've all done it. This is a very versatile tool. Those are available at squonkworks.com. We have a handful of different designs. Please go check them out. Get one if you like it. It supports us and lets us do more crazy stuff like this. Anyway, let's just get right into it. Let's jump to the focal point of this whole build and why it's called the Ferrari-powered Porsche. All right, guys, let's get the big things out of the way first. This right here is a Ferrari Maserati F136 V8. You'll also hear it called the Maserati M139. That is also accurate. That's what Maserati called it. However, this engine was in the time frame that Ferrari owned Maserati, and this engine was built by Ferrari in their Maranello factory. So calling this a Ferrari V8 is accurate. This engine debuted, I think, in 2001. Versions were used in the F430, the 458, I think one or two others. I think there was also a version in the Alfa Romeo 8C. But these are the ones we're after, the Maserati versions. This one specifically is an earlier engine. That it's a 4.2 liter dry sump. So the oil pump is down here. This is the oil reservoir. Oil comes out of this line right here, goes in. Engine keeps itself pressurized with oil. It's better for track stuff because since the oil isn't being stored in an oil pan with a pickup where the oil can slosh away from that pickup, you're not going to starve the engine of oil during high G maneuvers, which is actually what killed the engine in this car. But I'll get to that in a minute. But this engine, it's a dual overhead cam V8. Honestly, there's nothing too exotic about it other than the dry sump system. It really is just a normal dual overhead cam V8. It's a very well built one and a well designed one, but it is just a normal V8. There's nothing too crazy about it. So getting it wired up and getting this whole engine to run, really nothing too crazy. The main thing is these engines are dirt cheap, and that is because the Maseratis that they came in were kind of crap. They had a lot of electrical issues, they had some pretty bad transmission issues, and it really makes the whole car worth absolutely nothing. You can find them used for like 10 grand, and those were like $100,000 cars back in the day. But all the problems they had weren't because of the motor. These motors are great. This engine has been in this car for about 5 years now, a little bit less, and we have been absolutely merciless to it. It's been redlined like crazy, track days, just all kinds of abuse. And honestly, it's been flawless the whole way. We're so happy with this motor. There are more and more people that are starting to use these engines for swaps. There's only one big drawback to using this engine for swap, and we'll get into that later. I'll give you a hint. There's something supposed to be right here that's not. Anyway, we'll get into that a little bit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back, and I'm going to talk about the overall history of this magnificent machine. So let's go back to the beginning. So I was looking for a project car, something I could have fun with on the weekends and thrash on and not worry about breaking it and not have something to get to work Monday morning. So I found this 2001 Porsche Boxster. It was bone stock, 150 odd thousand miles. It was a little rough, but it was drivable, and so I bought it. And that was on a Friday. That evening we took it out and kind of drove around the hills a little bit and had some fun. And then Saturday we started hacking. To start, we basically just unbolted everything that could be unbolted. We took off the soft top, we took out most of the interior, we took out all the carpet out of the front and the trunk. Anything we could easily remove was gone. And then we just started autocrossing it and having some fun. Over the next couple of months, we did some basic mods. We got some cheap coilovers off eBay. We got a full eBay exhaust. We actually made our own intake out of dryer ducting from Home Depot. That was hilarious. It honestly worked decently well. After about a year of thrashing on it, kind of like that, we went to a track day. And on the drive home, the engine was making a really bad rattling sound. After some kind of half-assed diagnosis, we decided that it was timing chain. And that engine, after looking into it, we decided, you know what? This one just isn't worth rebuilding. Let's do an engine swap. Let's cram something else in. And so we started looking and thinking and hypothesizing and all this. We had three main criteria for an engine. Obviously, it had to be affordable. We're not rich. We've never been rich. We probably never will be rich. So it had to be something that an average person on an average salary could afford. Two, it had to be something with decent performance. The stock engine in this car made about 200 horsepower, maybe a slight bit over. We didn't want to take a step down. We didn't necessarily want to make a ton of power, but we didn't want to go slower. And the third criteria was it had to be something fun and interesting. Keeping those three criteria in mind, we went through all kinds of different engine ideas, but eventually we settled on one that sounded perfect, and that was the F136. I believe our inspiration was actually a video from Hoovie's Garage where he had a Maserati and was talking about how the car itself just had tons of different issues and why they were horrible cars to own, but there was one great reason to own one, and that was the engine. So we sat down and started reading. We were getting on the Maserati forums and anywhere we could read about the engine itself, and we came to the conclusion that it was the right one. We did some Googling and couldn't find more than I think about a dozen cars in the world that were running with this engine. There were a handful more where you could see somebody had started it but never finished. There were very few that were actually running. So we went for it. We got an engine. We did all the figuring out to decide on an ECU. We decided we were going to use the stock Boxster 5-speed. We found a company called Kennedy Engineered Products that specializes in engine and transmission adapters that could make an adapter plate and a flywheel and a clutch to stick it all together. And that is really where we made our one big mistake of this whole project, was using the Boxster 5-speed. That transmission was meant for an engine that made about 200 horsepower. So when you shove about 400 horsepower through one of those transmissions, it doesn't go too well. Over the years, we've blown up 3 of the transmissions. We had the original one that came in the car. Then we went to this purple one right here. That one lasted, I think, about a year and a half. That one lasted a decent while. Then we went to that red one back there. That one lasted, I think, about a month and a half. And that's when we decided, maybe these 5-speeds just aren't the play anymore. We thought that maybe we would just be able to buy them, break them, get new ones. They were really cheap back then. You could get one for like $300. Now they're going for upwards of $800. And so it's a little hard to justify just endlessly breaking them and getting another one. So that kind of leads to where the car is right now. So you can see at the moment there's no transmission in the car. This red one blew up a few months ago. It was right after we got all of this back together. The last step of that process was we were going to take it to the dyno at the local speed shop and get it properly tuned. It wasn't running bad, but it wasn't running great. And while it was on that dyno, at that full throttle, at about 4,500 RPM or so, it had a hitch. Not kind of like a misfire right there in the middle of it. And it was just enough that at full throttle, that power, then jerk of power, then back, was enough that it blew up third gear again. And that's when we really started looking at, okay, we need to do something different. And the reason this is all out now, we have not decided what transmission to do moving forward, but we were contacted by another YouTuber called Jimmy Oaks. He has a 911 he was looking at doing an engine swap in. And through a mutual friend of Vargas at Angel Motorsports, we talked him into doing a Maserati V8. Turns out he'd been thinking about doing one for a while, and we were finally able to talk to him about what all would need to go into it, but mainly we were able to convince him that it's doable. The one thing he needed was the adapter plate, because he had a transmission, but he wasn't able to get another adapter plate from Kennedy really quickly. There are a few people down right now, and it would have been a lead time of like 6 to 8 weeks before he could get a plate, and he wanted to get the ball rolling on his build. So we actually took our adapter plate off and sold it to him, so that way he could put his engine and transmission together and get it in the car and be mocking everything else up while he waits on Kennedy to build him a full kit for his build. So that brings us to where the car is right now. We know we're going to be doing something different about a transmission. We just don't really know what yet. We're still kind of looking around, seeing what other transaxles might be available, what's within our budget, what is even physically feasible. You know, we're still exploring options, but for now, the Porsche is in here. But what I'm going to do real quick at the end of this is I'm just going to take the camera, we're going to go through the car, and I'm just going to show you some of the things we've done over the past few years to this car that you might or might not have seen. Okay, so it might be easier to start with what we have not modified on this car. So for one, these mirrors. We've spray painted them, but these are the factory mirrors. They are otherwise unmodified. They originally were electronically adjustable, which would have plugged in there, but other than that, stock mirrors. The windshield, this is a factory windshield. It's not the original windshield because the original one got cracked, but this is an OEM windshield. The steering system, other than the steering wheel, the steering column and the steering rack itself are all factory. We've removed the power steering, but on the rack itself, all we did was loop the line from the inlet to outlet to keep power steering fluid in it so it stays lubricated. And that's about it. Pretty much everything else on this car has been touched at some point. So let's start up here at the front and work our way back. So this is the original front bumper. The main thing is we cut this massive hole to get airflow into our big central radiator. The factory Boxster had inlets right here and it had radiators right here. It had one right here and one right here. That was the stock cooling. That wasn't quite enough for our engine, so we did have to go to a bigger radiator with a better fan. There's not a whole lot else to talk about up here, you know. We have a master cylinder. This is the factory battery location. Obviously, all the wiring has been redone, cutoff switch. We did have to cut off the top of the shock mount so we could get to all the adjustments for our Godspeed coilovers. Obviously, we have this massive chute right here. This is relatively new. We haven't got to test this at track speeds yet. We're really hoping this is good airflow through the radiator. We did make these. We took out the factory plastic headlight housings and kind of used them as a template, but these are all sheet metal. We made these ourselves. These are Amazon lights. They're not very bright, not good for driving at night, but we do have headlights because this car is registered and insured for use on the road, so we do have to have headlights. Working our way back a little bit. The wheels, these are Work, Equip, and Hilo. I think I'm saying that right. These are actual 3-piece wheels. We got them really cheap because they're 17-inch diameter. And there are very few decent performance tires that aren't drag-oriented that are 17 inches. These are Toyo R888Rs. They've been pretty good for us. This set specifically is getting on a little bit, but it's been through a couple track days. The car handles better than we are capable of driving it, so these are doing us good enough. The brakes, the brake calipers are stock. I'm fairly confident these are not the stock brake rotors. They are the ones that were on it when I bought the car. Don't know if they're factory or not, but I'm pretty sure they're not. But the brakes are pretty good. We've never really had to do much about the brakes. See, we come back a little bit here to the interior. Obviously, everything has been touched at some point. All of this is all gone. This is a factory piece. It's been edited a little bit to fit better for us and get rid of a lot of crap that we just don't need anymore. The crossbar right there does tie into the cage as a whole. It is a structural cross brace. It also works as a pretty good dash mount right there in the middle. This right here, you can see this bar is very solidly welded into the crash structure, and the cage itself goes into it top and bottom. So all this ties into the car's structure about as good as it possibly can. And it comes back here, and it's welded to the plate. Once again, 2 more parts right into the car's crash structure. Once again, about as good as it possibly can be. For the seats, we got a Corbeau driver, NRG passenger, auto power, belts, both sides. One thing we're really proud of here is you see this little, it's just a basic little shackle that I think we got from the Lowe's down the road. And isn't that just satisfying? We got it to where it just fits the door just perfectly. Just We're really proud of that. It's a little silly, but we're really proud of it. And then back here is where things just kind of go wild. You know, we have several videos on doing all of this, but just give y'all a quick rundown. So we made this entire thing to fit the engine and transmission. So we got the nice engine mounts that it just sits on ever so perfectly. Same thing back here for the transmission, even though, you know, that might end up changing. We got our nice dry sump oil tank mounted right here. We got our multi-link pushrod suspension. That was a lot of fun to get developed. We haven't been able to take it to the track and really test it yet, but I'm very confident in it. And then everything comes back here to our nice mesh with our Amazon taillights. One fun thing, this Ferrari badge right here is actually real. We have this verified by a Ferrari dealership. This is a real Ferrari badge. Very unnecessary, but we're happy about that. And that's kind of a rough look at the car itself. I mean, there's a million more details I could dig into, but this video would be an hour long, and nobody wants that. So there we go, guys. There's a rough history of the Porsche and a status of where it is. Unfortunately, at the moment, we can't really say where it's going to go in the future. We have to figure out what we're going to do about this transmission issue. The 5 speeds are just too weak. Replacing them was getting old and expensive. The transmissions that we know would work are just ridiculously expensive. Like I said, we are normal guys on a normal budget, so we can't really afford to go spend $15,000 on a super fancy sequential. As amazing as that would be, and as much as I would love to, we just can't afford to do that. So we're going to keep researching, we're going to keep looking. I'm sure there's something out there that we'll be able to use. More likely not, we'll just end up saving for a couple of months, and you know, because there's 2 of us, we can split it and it's a little more doable. Maybe we'll just get a Boxster 6-speed, or maybe we'll find some other transaxle we can use. Obviously not a whole lot of different people use transaxles, at least on the affordable end of things, so we are limited when it comes to that. And that's something worth keeping in mind. If you want to do any kind of engine swaps, think it all the way through before you get into it, or you'll end up like us. But we'll figure something out, and when we do, you will see it right here on the Squonk Works YouTube channel, so please subscribe. If you have any questions that I didn't answer about the car or anything else we've done, please leave a comment. I'll be in the comments answering questions, just saying hi, all that fun stuff. Remember, we've got these cool shirts, squonkworks.com. We have a couple other designs. We've got one with the bus on it. We've got one of this one doing a burnout on it. We've got a couple of other generic ones with just cool art that we really liked. Please go check it out. It helps us out a lot. And have a nice day, and see y'all next time.